My job today is to challenge those who join us to activate the mind and then to provide practical ways in which you are leveraging the mind. And oftentimes, when we think of the word strong, we do think of those attributes. But essentially, what we're referring to is the display of strength. And that strength is a byproduct of what has been stored in the mind. Your strength is a conduit of the performance that you have the ability to do, but it first starts in the mind. It is rooted in the mind. And so your display of strength is based off of what has been stored in the mind. I want to ask, like, what is this? Do you know what this is? Do you know the name of it or the function of it? What is this? Legacy says, I do not know what this is. I didn't either. I was doing some research. I did not know what it is, but I see it all the time. I see it on sides of houses. I see it like in gymnasiums, in basements. This is what you call an electrical conduit, and it's responsible for transmitting or protecting the transmission of wires um, or cables that are routed in a building. So um, it's a form of like protection that allows these things to travel inside of a building. And I like to compare a conduit to the mind. Our mind is literally a conduit to what we have stored inside of it. We have the what distinguishes human being from any other animal is that we have been giving the ability to think critically, to process, and to store memories, house feelings, and those things happen in the mind. And so the distinction between the brain and the mind is the brain is your physical, it's the physical, tangible, meaning you can touch it. I could crack open my skull and like literally touch the substance of my brain. And the mind is not something that you can touch, but it lives inside of the brain. It is an intangible, it is not something substantial that you can hold, but it is literally like the powerhouse and the root of all of our actions, behaviors, and to some degree, a really big part of our successes and or challenges. And so let's define like the mind. Let's break this down. You have two parts of the mind, and that's a keyword, by the way. Remember, we talked about keywords. If you remember them at the end of our 4-day challenge, you will be eligible for a prize. You have to get all of the keywords each day. So the first keyword for today is two minds. You have two minds. So technically, you have three. But the ones we're going to talk about today, you have a conscious mind, you have a subconscious mind, and you have an unconscious mind. But the two that we're going to dissect today, which affects how you show up, it affects how you appear in relationships, it affects your performance and the things that you are a part of. It is a very critical part of like not only like your physical makeup, but how you show up in the world, whether that be boldly or shrinking. All of that is a byproduct of what lives inside of your mind. So you have a conscious mind. That is where you are like you are most rational, you are thinking most critically. When you're consciously thinking about something, it requires a lot of energy. That's why this whole mindful movement is like not trending, but why it's helpful in practice because it's easy to wander into what we call the subconscious mind. Sub meaning below the mind. So in your conscious state, you are experiencing your five senses. You are hearing things consciously. You are seeing things consciously. You are experiencing me right now consciously. If you were in the room with me, you could touch me. That's you having a conscious understanding of what's happening. So we encounter the world through our conscious mind. We are most logical when we are thinking in a state of consciousness. That's why when people say things like, you need to sleep on it or wait until you're not so upset, what they're trying to say is wait until you've restored a level of consciousness about how you feel so that you can say what you mean. What happens is when we are sleep deprived, when we're upset, disgruntled for a long period of time, When we are in any modified state where our normal self is not in existence, our conscious mind it's really difficult for that place to show up. Remember, I said it takes a lot of energy to be conscious. So when you are not operating at your peak self, you are literally operating from a state of subconscious. Your subconscious, which is below what you see consciously, this is your storehouse. This is where all of your emotions are stored. All of the principles that you've been taught as a child, they're stored there. Your memorization to ride a bike comes from your subconscious. So there were some things that you learned, whether as a teen, as an adult. You learned to drive, you learned to ride a bike, you learned how to walk to grandma's house, you might have learned how to count money. Over time, you don't have to relearn those things because your your mind memorizes them and stores them in your subconscious. And some of that is called muscle memory. So it frees up your ability to think about other things. So if you remember when you first started driving, how anxious you were, like it was exhausting probably. You're like, oh my God, I'm gonna hit a curve. You're like overthinking. And then as you get more seasoned in your driving, it's not expending as much energy because you've stored in your mind subconsciously how to drive. So it doesn't cost a lot of energy. It's the same thing if you know how to skate. You might have learned how to skate as a child, and it's easy. You may go back, you're a little rusty at first, but eventually your mind, what you've stored in your mind, your subconscious, like brings up to memory, and you're like, you turn from a little bit of rusty to not so rusty. And so, what I feel like the only way to get something into your subconscious mind is to consciously experience it repeatedly. So we spend about 86% of our time in our subconscious. Remember, I said conscious thinking requires a lot of energy. It's exhausting. Well, it can be exhausting. So that means when people say things like, sometimes people are operating mindless, or I feel like they're clocked out, or I feel like they don't mean what they say. What they're referring to is that the person is not operating from a state of consciousness. They're operating from what they've stored in their like emotions, what they've stored in from their past experience, and we're speaking from those things. In relationships, how this impacts us, like in the not so good, is that when we have ill feelings, when we're upset, angry, disappointed, and we're not conscious about the language that we're using, because remember, it takes a lot of energy to be conscious. I rephrase that, I would say it takes a lot of energy to be thoughtful. That's the same thing. So subconsciously, you already have pre-labels in your mind about people. You have uh, feelings about what they did. You might have stored some of the things that they said. And so subconsciously, it's easy to just say anything because it's in storage. So the only way to change those behaviors that sometimes affect our relationships inside of the home and outside of the home is to like change what's happening in your conscious state of mind. So that means that you have to repeatedly absorb new information. And the reason why I love teaching the distinction between the two is because it is easy to operate from a place of memory than it is to operate from a place of consciousness. And so there's two when okay, let me backtrack for a second. There's two ways in which I'm going to give you today in which you can practice being more conscious. So I know there are like a lot of activities about being more mindful. It's the same thing, but I'm going to teach you two ways. Two of them, you've likely heard of these before, but I'm going to give you homework assigned to one of the ways in which you can practice being more conscious. The thing about our subconscious is that just like I said yesterday, when we can't control time, we can only organize it. And when we choose or elect not to organize our time, we're being controlled by it. It's the same thing with your mind. The powerful thing, and I said this yesterday, that God gives us is free will. Like he gifts us the free will to make decisions. He also gifted us the mind. And consciously, it would require, if you wanted to be biblical, it would require that we would train our mind to follow him consciously. Over time, And we find this, done in routine. If you attend or you have a faith practice or a faith, not a regimen, but a routine, you don't have to think about practicing faith. That's why they say, well, I'm not going to say that. But um, one of the biggest things that Miles Monroe talked about that I really love is that he said he described the subconscious mind as your heart, and he referred to the biblical scripture as a man thinketh, so is he. And what he was saying was the only way to get something. Let me rephrase that. A man's heart, his motives, his intentions, what he believes will be stored in his subconscious mind. And that's actually really true. All of the principles, the life experiences, your feelings, like your subconscious is like the storehouse. Those things they are the makeup of your heart. So he was saying when you apply the biblical scripture, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. He was saying, as a man thinketh in his subconscious, so is he. Um, so I wanted to, before I go into these two ways that I'm gonna challenge you to think more consciously, so that you can show up, whatever your desire is, whatever that change is for you, so that you can show up differently this year. Before I do that, I wanted to say this: all of the things that I'll be teaching this week are parts of curriculums that I do in organizations. And it's not just with teens, but those who support them. Sometimes it's an internship program, sometimes it's those who lead the internship program. And one of the ways that you can support me this year is if any of the content that we talk about for the next 4 days are things that you feel would be important for any organization that you're a part of, or they could benefit from it, I just want you to consider this. Consider like sharing your experience with somebody who has the ability to make a decision to bring me in to hire me. So that's one. Um, if you could recommend any of the materials that I produce to that decision maker or someone who you think may be interested. And this is organizational level. And then last, like, you can always suggest me as a speaker. That's the primary method of business. My goal is that it will become secondary, but right now it's the primary method of exchange of business. So I just wanted to throw that plug in there before we transition to these two ways that I want you to apply about programming your mind. You literally become what you consume. This is a really tough, I really do struggle with this as it relates to young men and young women, because some of the environments, no, not some, all of the environments, they don't get to choose. They don't get to choose their parents or their relatives. So the environment that they come up in, whatever they hear and see repeatedly, the absorption of that they are experiencing consciously, they're seeing, touching, feeling, they're having an exchange of emotions, they're having lots of experiences, they're having a lots of exchange of feelings for the duration of life before they have ownership or autonomy over their time and their environments. Think about that. Before a child or young adult has autonomy, meaning control, they can control their schedule. For this long period, they are already automatically in an environment with an exchange of experience, with an exchange of emotions, with words being said to them. Those experiences are being stored into their minds. I always say kids are like a blank canvas, and what we paint on them becomes their identity, like literally. So the words that they continually hear, they matter. The words that we continually absorb, they matter. Like the types of relationships we bind ourselves with, they matter. And so we literally do become those things. So when I meet people and I use this example online. When I watched Kevin Hart's documentary, one of the things that I noticed was not Kevin Hart, what's his name? Kanye West. When I watched his documentary, one of the things I noticed was that Donda was a complete wording, and how she talked to him is the reason why he had an inflated self-esteem. But she said he came out the womb like that. She said there were some things about my son I couldn't even tell him otherwise myself. But throughout the documentary, she was affirming the heck out of him. There was one point in the documentary when he had played his record for he was playing When It All Falls Down. He went to Rockefeller Records to play the track for them because he wanted to be recognized no longer as a producer but more so as an artist. They weren't taking him serious. So he literally walked up in there, no appointment, nothing, and was like putting his music on press and play. And nobody was listening. They was like, oh, okay. And they just continue doing what they doing. And so he walked out of there. He was just feeling like, like, dang, nobody really rocking with me for real. He went to his mom's house. He never even said like what happened. He just went in there and they were sitting down and she started reciting to him. She was like, Kanye, remember that song that you wrote? And she started rapping the lyrics like, I love when I see parents interested in the things that their kids are interested in, even if it don't interest them. Because that is a self-esteem boost. Like when you take an interest in something that really don't interest you, we do that with our spouses. We really don't care to do the things that they do, but we love them, so we do that. I think we should do the same thing with our kids. So anyway, she starts rapping to a song he didn't even remember. And she said, Kanye, it's just a matter of time. You are already great. She said it just like that in that tone. And he was like, she said, just keep pushing. And all he did was shake his head. And she was like, you remember that time? She started like drawing back memories. She was affirming the heck out of him. And it was powerful. And when he left his visit with her, they laughed and they did some other things. But you could tell his energy had shifted. That is literally the power of being in an environment that's affirming. And those things over time, he was 19 at this point in the documentary. But I could just put on my Holy Ghost imagination. If she was affirming him like that at 19, I wonder what she was saying at 5, 6, 7. I wonder what she told him when she realized he was a lyricist. Like, that is why his self-esteem is through the roof, to his own detriment, by the way. But the point I'm trying to say is that what we hear repeatedly becomes stored in our minds. That is why we cannot just be like in environments and places or absorbing things that do not feed, edify, grow, like repeatedly. Sometimes, every now and then you may indulge in some things that are mindless. But over time, the only thing it's doing is diminishing or clouding it, minimizing. It is not like becoming like, if it's not something of value or activity of value, it's not adding any value. That's all the way down to the music that we listen to, the kinds of people that we talk to, the kinds of conversations that we are repeatedly having. Over time, like, those things are being stored into your mind. What I learned when I started getting serious about like really making money in my business, as soon as I changed my community, that's when I started making money. That's the only difference that I did. I just invested in being amongst other like-minded, like, business leaders. And they were talking about like the kinds of sales they were going after, the kinds of commitments that they had to make, the kinds of things they had to change. I started absorbing that just based off of proximity. And and then I started doing or acting in that way. Well, the flip side of that is you can be in an environment that does not mirror who God called you to be. There's no alignment, and it could really be like harmful, is for lack of better words. But I think I drove home this point good enough. You literally become what you continually consume. Consumption is the second keyword for today. So the two things that you can do to program your mind, because now you understand like why absorption or continual absorption of something is important. You understand the distinction between the two minds, how they work, how you live like 86% of your time, thoughts, like your behaviors, what you act out of, what you act in response to, those things happen from a plate of from a place of subconscious, unless you are being intentional about thinking consciously. So you get that. You understand what people mean when they say practice mindfulness and practice gratitude, which is bringing you also in a state of consciousness. So you get that. So now with that understanding, two ways that you can practice programming your mind. So let's say you have things you say, okay, I have some limiting beliefs that I can like begin to reverse, or I have some things that I want to like remove from my subconscious, they're not in alignment with who I feel like I am. Here are two ways in which you can begin to program your mind. The first one is through visualization. This is super powerful. I don't know if you've ever like sat down and wrote out what something looks like that you desire. Like, what is it that you want and what does that look like? Writing it out. So many people don't know what they want and what they like. And if you are in pursuit of something or you are in like expectation of God blessing you about something, your job obviously is to pray about it. But while you're in your waiting room, do a visualization of what that looks like. So, my wellness coach, oh, this is TMI. My wellness coach had me do a visualization of my husband. So, the first thing that started coming out of my mouth were all of the things on my list. And she told me, nope, I don't want that list. I want you to close your eyes. Like she made me shift from my subconscious, like literally in the midst of the session, to my conscious mind, because subconsciously I do have a list that I have memorized. I could just tell you like this. So she told me to close my eyes and to really think about what I envision. Like, what is the visualization of marriage? What does that look like for me? And then we were like silent for maybe about 2 or 3 minutes. And then she had me open my eyes and write down what I saw. It was a very powerful exercise. And do y'all know, we also pray too. And this had a spiritual practice, and I have not told anybody this, by the way. But I literally visualized being married to a minister and we were doing ministry at a church. I haven't shared that with nobody, but in that exercise, that's what I saw. And she asked me to like, what were the colors in the room and what did the room look like? That's a very deep level of visualization. I'm not saying you got to go there. But what I am saying is that there are different forms of visualization for different things. But for the sake of programming your mind, if you are aiming to do better at something, maybe you have a better idea. I want to be a better daughter. What does that look like? Like describing an environment of what a better daughter looks like. If you say, I want to be a better dad, what does that look like? If you say, I want this new job, what does that look like literally day to day? What you wearing when you walk in there? How does it feel? What does the office aroma smell like? And the beauty in visualization is that the law of attraction is real. Not only that, when you make your petitions known to God, especially when they're in His will, He will answer them. And so, but what this is doing is helping you be conscious about the thing that you desire and the change that you're looking to implement. So, visualization is one. The second one is affirmations. Now, I was not a fan of this when I first learned about like how do you get something from your conscious mind to be stored in your subconscious so that you can begin behaving from that place. Um I really had to I because I was never the person that was like, I am beautiful, I am worth. That just wasn't, I just felt like that was silly. But when I learned the science behind it, and when I understood the power of repetition and visualization, then it clearly made sense why affirmations were important. But they only work if you have an emotion vividly attached to what you're saying. So when I use the excellence creed, when I say my mind is of excellence, I've been studying the mind. So in my mind, I know what that looks like. I know like the conscious and subconscious mind, those words resonate with me. So the affirmations that you choose, they have to have an emotional appeal and a strong visualization in order for your brain to even process it as like something it understands and wants to accept. So the affirmations that we commonly hear might not be one that resonates with you. Your job is to find the ones that you have an emotional attachment to, and create I am statements around that. So I have an emotional attachment to excellence. It's the highest quality of effort. It's the only option to show up. So to me, those words really resonate. And it really, one time I was driving, I was on my way to, what school was I driving to? I know I was on 2 Lane Road. I was supposed to be there. I was like 45 minutes late, and the GPS said I was going to be there in an hour and 15 minutes. And I've never been late for any of my clients in 9 years. I was flipping out. It was traffic. I'm hyperventilating. And I literally like broke. I just started reciting my excellence creed. I am excellence. My mind is of excellence. I kept saying it over and over. And I looked back at the GPS and I had it like knocked down 30 minutes based off of a new route it took me to. And I ended up getting there early. But what I'm trying to say is what we are saying to ourselves literally has a physical reaction to our body. The other time which affirmations were really helpful for me, I was talking to this guy and I was working on a virtual summit and I was very stressed out. I had everything that could go wrong was going wrong. And I called him and I told him what I felt. And he was like, close your eyes. Like literally, he was like, close your eyes. I was like, man, don't hit me with nothing stupid. And he was like, I want you to repeat after me. And then he had me recite things like, what God has given me is enough. I trust the supernatural power that he's like literally. I was repeating those after him. He had maybe like 15 of them. And then when we finished the statements, he was like, open your eyes. And I was like, and I opened my eyes. He was like, how do you feel? I was like, very calm. And he said, yeah, you have the power to change your mood at any moment just through words. And so I actually, you know what? The Excellence Creed was influenced by that interaction with him. Now that I think about it, I never acknowledged that until today. So your homework, now that you have an understanding of the mind, how to program the mind, your homework is to create the visualization that's related to, remember yesterday we made that inventory list of the things that we're responsible for, and we identified the things that we're going to do. One of those areas that you are doing, the one that you want to be better at or you want to challenge yourself to grow in, I want you to create a visualization around that thing or area. You can journal it. I think you should journal it because when it comes to pass, the only thing that does is increase your confidence about doing these exercises. So if you never practice these things, then you know how this might be too much, but when you first start getting rewarded for something, if it's an external thing, like let's say you get money for cleaning up around the house, or you get commission for like selling an extra product, or you're an affiliate. Initially, getting something like a gift or money is extrinsic. Like there's a value. What motivates you is that you're going to get something physical. Those kinds of rewards are not only being rewarded in that way for the long haul is not sustainable. If you want to commit to something and you want to change, you have to shift from something being extrinsic to intrinsic, meaning even if I don't get a physical thing, internally I feel good. Like it makes me feel like I made a good decision. The gym is like this too. When you first start going to the gym, you're going because you want to look better. Like I'm going because I want abs. I'm going because I want to lose weight. And eventually you're going because it just feels good. I feel like I crossed something off my list. It shifts from extrinsic to intrinsic. And that's what makes it sustainable over time. It's the same concept. So when you practice affirmations and visualizations, the whole point of me saying this is if you write your homework down and what you visualize comes to pass, the activity of doing this eventually will become extrinsic to intrinsic. It's a value that's like, now it's like routine. It's like a normal practice. And that is always the goal. That's always the goal. Any questions from tonight? Any questions or comments?